Hey, my name is Kian Vafa. I'm a PhD student at Columbia University, and today I'll be discussing rationales for sequential predictions. This is work with collaborators Yuntian Deng, David Bly, and Sasha Rush. Say you've trained a sequence model, and it has generated the following sequence. The Supreme Court on Tuesday rejected a challenge to the constitutionality, etc. And you as a practitioner want to know why your model generated the word constitutionality. There are many ways to pose this question, but one possible perspective is through the use of rationales, which are a subset of tokens that can explain individual predictions. They were originally developed for classification, but we use them for sequences like the one above, where a possible rationale for the word constitutionality includes phrases like Supreme Court and challenge and important syntactic words like the, but notably no phrases that add seemingly no information, such as on Tuesday. In this talk, I'll be discussing greedy rationalization, which is a method that we've proposed for rationalizing predictions from sequence models. It can be applied to any sequence model and any task that uses sequence models, such as language modeling, machine translation, summarization, etc. Moreover, this method is efficient. Let's begin by discussing what makes a good rationale. And we think that good rationales have two important characteristics. One is that they're sufficient, which pretty much just means that the model should make the same prediction using only the words in the rationale as if it had used every word in the full history. Sufficiency on its own isn't so difficult. For example, every word in the history is by definition a sufficient rationale, but it may not be useful because it may be long. So we also prioritize brevity. We want rationales to be short so they can be useful to practitioners. We combine these two goals into one objective, and we say that the best rationale is the smallest subset of inputs that would lead to the same prediction as using the full history. Mathematically, a rationale for a prediction yt is given by this objective, where this objective looks for the smallest rationale s, such that the distribution over the target word, when conditioning on only the words in a rationale, is maximized by the true target yt. An important quantity in this objective is p of yt given ys, which is the probability of the target word when conditioning on only the words in a rationale s. I'll discuss in a bit how we estimate this quantity. This objective is NP-hard, so we propose a greedy approach that we call greedy rationalization that works like this. We begin with an empty rationale s. While the words in the rationale aren't sufficient for predicting the true generation, yt, we add words to the rationale one at a time, choosing the word that results in the highest likelihood of the true model prediction, yt. Although this approach is an approximation, so it's not guaranteed to find the smallest rationale that is sufficient, it is guaranteed to find sufficient rationales. Moreover, it's inspired by greedy approaches to the set cover problem in algorithm theory, where instead of trying to find subsets that cover a set, we are trying to find a subset of the history that make the same prediction as the full history. Let's walk through a step of greedy rationalization. Say the sequence is the court struck down the law because it was unconstitutional, and we're trying to rationalize the word unconstitutional. Let's say the rationale so far includes the previous word was. Greedy rationalization goes through every possible word in the history and probes the conditional distribution of the target word given the rationale and the candidate. So here it's asking for the conditional probability of unconstitutional given the and was, which is less than 1%. It goes through each word in the history and calculates this conditional probability. So far, the word law is the one that makes the word unconstitutional have the highest probability at 8%. It goes through every word, and when it has gone through every word in the history, it adds the word that had the highest likelihood of the target word, which in this case was law. Because the rationale has to be sufficient for predicting unconstitutional, it then checks whether the top predicted word is unconstitutional, which it isn't. It then repeats the process in the previous slide, where it may add the word the. And it keeps repeating until it finds a rationale that is sufficient for predicting unconstitutional. So in this case, it finds that the rationale, including the words court, struck, the, law, and was, This rationale is sufficient for predicting unconstitutional. This procedure is straightforward, but it may bring up a few questions. One is, how do we estimate this quantity that conditions on incomplete histories to predict the target word? Another is the efficiency. Since greedy rationalization may require many model evaluations, what is its efficiency? Final question is, how do we evaluate rationales and compare rationales from different models? Let's begin with the first one. Typically, sequence models are trained autoregressively, so they can predict the next words conditioned on the full history, yet they typically aren't trained to predict the next word conditioned on only subsets of the history. One option is to marginalize out missing words from the full history conditional distribution, but this is intractable. Instead, we propose training differently, where instead of training on just conditioning on the full history, we train to make predictions conditional on incomplete histories. And one way to do this is through word dropout, where histories are randomly dropped out and the next word prediction is made with these incomplete histories. So as an example, say your sequence is the dog and you're trying to predict the next word after dog, barks. Word dropout may drop out a word in the history, say the first word, the, and training with word dropout, you would still have to predict the next word, barks, but instead of conditioning on the full history, you would have to make the prediction on the incomplete history. In practice, we find that we don't need to train models end-to-end with word dropout. Instead, we show that we can fine-tune models like GPT-2 with word dropout so that they can make sensible predictions with incomplete histories. Let's talk about efficiency. One of our findings is that if the final rationale found by greedy rationalization is small, then the greedy rationalization procedure can be run at no extra asymptotic complexity as to making the first prediction in the first place. More specifically, if we're using set-based models like transformers, evaluating them on many small inputs, as is required for greedy rationalization, can be as efficient as evaluating once using the full history. This is because models like transformers are quadratic in the size of the argument. So when we're conditioning on the full history, they're quadratic in the full history O of t squared. However, when we evaluate on subsets of this history, as we do for greedy rationalization, it's quadratic in the size of this smaller subset of the history, so that many evaluations with this smaller history can be as asymptotically efficient as conditioning once on the full history. Lastly, let's discuss evaluation. One way to evaluate rationalization methods is to compare against human annotations. However, since rationales for sequence models is a new research area, we've found that sequence-level human annotations are largely unavailable. So we create our own dataset of human annotations based on the Lambda dataset. Lambda is a dataset containing of passages where the final word is missing that humans can typically predict. So here's an example. "I have a proposition for you," he began, pulling his hands down from under his chin and pushing out of the chair. "One that you won't be able to blank." Now you may be able to guess that the final word is refuse. However, it may be harder for you to list the words that were important for you predicting refuse as the target word. So we create an annotation game that has two roles, selectors and predictors. Selectors first see the entire passage and rank words by how important they are for predicting the final word. So in this example, the first word that they may rank is the word to, the word before refuse, as denoted by the underline. The next word may be able, followed by proposition, etc. After they've ranked these words, predictors see words one word at a time in the order ranked by these selectors and are asked to guess the final word as each new word is revealed. So the first thing a predictor will see is just the first word ranked by the selector, and they'll be asked to guess the missing word. This is going to be very challenging at first. However, as more words are revealed, this task becomes easier, until they are eventually able to predict the correct target word. We say that the human annotation corresponds to the visible words when the predictor first guessed the true word. In effect, this is our way of finding the smallest sufficient rationale for humans. So underlined are the words that are in the human annotation for this example, and we have shown the greedy rationalization in red. This greedy rationalization is for GPT-2. We found that there's significant overlap between the two rationales, and moreover, every word in the human annotation is contained in the greedy rationale. We compare rationale methods we compare various rationale methods by evaluating their similarity to human annotations. So we compare greedy rationalization against gradient and attention-based baselines, and we find that not only is greedy rationalization better able at optimizing the combinatorial objective, it finds rationales that are more similar to human annotations as measured by set similarity metrics IOU and F1. We released the full dataset with 107 examples available online. I want to discuss one more example, which is a machine translation experiment, where we measure how similar the greedy rationales are to human labeled alignment for machine translation. So here is a German to English transformer-based machine translation model with the greedy rationale for a sentence in black and the human labeled alignment in yellow. For this example, the greedy rationale and the human labeled alignments are quite similar. We discuss this experiment in more detail, and we also include more experiments, specifically those in model faithfulness, in the paper. So in conclusion, we have framed sequential rationalization as a combinatorial optimization that combines both sufficiency and brevity. We showed how a greedy procedure, which we call greedy rationalization, can efficiently rationalize sequence models. We showed that models can be equipped to make predictions with incomplete histories by fine-tuning with word dropout. And we also discussed a dataset of human annotations that we collected for language modeling based on the Lambda dataset. We released code along with our fine-tuned model and annotated dataset on GitHub. Thank you.